So the two of us were the first women, and we put up with crap from the guys, but we were both focused on doing our job and learning our jobs.
40 years ago in the Air Force, a woman flyer, no matter how competent, wasn't always welcome in the cockpit.
Everybody has a ruck. I did a lot of rucking in the Army, a lot of miles with a heavy pack and a weapon, and that's just what it feels like in your head sometimes when there's stuff in there, that memories and people and places that keep coming up a time and again.
Another woman looks back over her life of armed service and of love, reminded of both by a treasured pair of riding boots. Hello, welcome to the Mighty Pen Podcast. I'm David L. Robbins, your host and founder of the Mighty Pen Project, a writing program for veterans and their spouses in partnership with the Virginia War Memorial Foundation here in Richmond, Virginia. In this podcast, I'll sit down with two women who both became 06 colonels, Marcy Atwood in the Air Force and Beth Liechti, Airborne in the Army. Marcy is the author of our first story, Witch 54. Afterwards, I'll sit down with her, then we'll hear Packers, followed by a conversation with Beth Liechti. Now let's listen to Witch 54, read by Caitlin Nolan.
Witch 54 taxied over to the side of the Hammerhead. We slid in behind her. Brakes set, yawns stifled. We run our pre-takeoff checklists. The co-pilot has the flight manual on his lap recalculating the takeoff roll. The winds are dead, the night pitch black. The fog is thick in the California agricultural valley. My two-ship of tankers is the first of 5 aircraft to take to the wind to feed the Blackbird on its national security mission. SR-71, Blackbird, Habu, and Sleds are all names for her. The nickname Sled, how she darts up to take gas, reminds me of a bobsled running the slalom. I've done countless of these, high-priority missions with critical information as the target. Like we have to hear it every time to make us believe. For me, the pre-flight pep talk from the ops group colonel never ceases to make me push hard into my seat. Even that talk that night didn't stop me thinking. The fog is too thick. We don't have takeoff visibility. Errant cows could be blanketed in the fog and we'd feel them slam into the gear before we'd see them. And then there was the rendezvous point. It was dead center of a line of thunderstorms moving up from Mexico to Texas. An altitude change or delayed timing would not make a difference. The storm was plowing down on the Gulf, and she wouldn't stop until she hit Canada. The cockpit is silent. New takeoff rotation numbers are posted. We're going to use all 13,000 feet of runway tonight. We are that pregnant. Cleared for takeoff. In the lead, Witch 54 takes the runway as the colonel in his Suburban next to us flicks the mic and says, "Good hunting." I hit the stop clock, exactly 2 minutes between takeoffs. A voice in my head says, "Pray." Without hesitation, I lay my gloved hands on the inertial navigation system on my right and the comm panel on my left. Please, God, take care of this jet, this mission, and these crews. Witch 54 waddles onto the runway. Losing sight of lead within seconds after her throttle advance, I key the mic. 15 seconds. The fog swirling from the jet wash bangs on the windshield as we take the runway. The pilot applies the brakes too hard, slamming me into my harness, creating bruise number 6 for the week. 45 seconds. Last-minute switches are flipped, radar on with tilt full up, straining to locate lead in the air. 1 minute 20. The pilot calls for roll call. The boom checks in, ready to roll. The co-pilot Rogers up. I key the mic. Let's go. Witch 55 rumbles down the runway like a hippopotamus doing the Argentine tango, executing sharp jerks as our weight fights the thrust. The co-pilot is straining to see the Christmas lights, spaced like missing teeth on the right side of the runway, indicating we are still on it. The pilot has both hands on the yoke, staring at the mist. My eyes are glued to the instrument panel in front of the pilots. I announce, speed 105 knots. The CO sees the 5,000-foot marker whip by. Speed 125. We need 150 knots. The CO yells 8,000 feet. The needle bounces on the airspeed indicator, hovering just under 150. The CO screams 10,000 feet. The pilot pulls hard, rotating us up through the cotton candy dream into the pitch black night. We break ground as the harsh marks at the end of the runway blur into a solid line. We climb slowly, even though the air is cold and the old gal strains, making creaky noises like Grandma's rocking chair on the old wood porch. We are running checklists, and I'm searching for lead on my radar scope. The sweep sees nothing. I'm greeted with a faded black scope as the neon sweep goes round, leaving a trail of green dust in its wake. Lead should be within 15 miles, but there is no bullet-shaped blip showing her position. Breaking through the fog, we climb through 10,000 feet. Another checklist runs automatically. Passing 18,000 feet, we report into air traffic control. Witch 55, your party is ahead 25 miles, 20 degrees right. Cleared to join. I slam the scope up and extend the range to 50 miles. The CO gets on the common frequency. Hey, 54, slow down. Witch 54 comes back. About time you all joined in. I locate the blip. Pilot, nav, continue left turn to heading 120. Raj. Pilot, nav, range is 34 miles and closing in 5 minutes. Wojo is the lead navigator. She reported to the 343rd Air Refueling Squadron 3 weeks after I did. We were the first female office crew members. The radio cracks. Witch 55 flight Oakland Center cleared as requested. I missed the flight change request from lead, but I checked the routing and see Wojo is cutting off a corner to make up time. That's the beauty of night flying. Less air traffic means we can go direct rather than abide by the air corridor game. We close to 45 degrees and 1 mile of lead. Two's in. Now it's flight following her tail on my radar, like stalking a girl in the bar. I take glances at the target azimuth I've set up every 30 seconds. Every 5th minute, I spend 20 seconds checking waypoints and logging time, distance, speed, and heading to calculate a dead reckoning position. It only takes a couple of blinks to degrade 100% attention on the radar to make the reckoning really dead. I lean away from the seat, undoing my lap belt and unhooking 3 of the 5 harnesses to relieve the swaddling feeling. The flight to the Gulf is calm. Lead is steady, the 2 aircraft commander pilots skilled. The boom is sleeping sitting up, a common talent among us. 2 hours later, we are over Texas. No lights are visible on the deck. It's sparse, open range. The pilot has a lock-on lead, staring out the window, head turned as if listening with his good ear to the kiddies in the back seat. I flip the radar to 200 miles. Instantly, I begin to sweat. The solid white line of storms has no brakes. It crawls from the top of the radar down my spine in a mad dash to beat us to the notional maypole where we'll dance with the SR-71. I keyed the mic. Crew, nav, it doesn't look good at the rendezvous point. Strap in. The CO checks off for a head call. My midnight snack, peanut butter and jelly on white bread, sits on the floor untouched in its flimsy white cardboard box. We begin the race around the air track, waiting for the rendezvous time. Our chariot is bouncing 10 feet up and 15 feet down as if losing a wheel. The violence of the shaking increases, and the radar backscatter noise is getting so thick I begin to lose the Witch 54 blip a half a mile away. The main frequency is silent because lead has switched to secure comm with the Blackbird, who is descending in the blind. No radar, no visual, just the insides of bed sheets shrink-wrapped around their space-suited eyes. Lead is trying to stay on course. Breathing deeply with my mantra, going, I'm not getting sick, I'm not getting sick. I check my stopwatch. The final turn in front of the Blackbird is in 2 minutes. Pilot, nav, stand by for the turn heading 330. Lead should be turning in 5, 4, 3. Nav, I've lost them. The lightning hit on the pilot's side, just in front of the window. All my instruments went dead. The static electricity reached a finger up my back as it galloped down the inside of the aircraft to the boomer. My ears muted all sounds, but I heard the pilot yelling for emergency checklists. I prayed, please give me the power to the instruments. Please. I checked my scope. Nothing. I checked the rendezvous time. The Blackbird is always on time, but we flew an additional 10 seconds in the wrong direction. Since we were 500 feet above lead and the wingspan is 50 feet, I keyed the mic. Pilot, nav, turn now. Heading 330 on the Whiskey Compass, give me an approximate 35-degree bank until I call it. I was banking on lead not being near us. My heart pounded loudly during the 2 minutes it takes to turn a tanker 180 degrees. I know this pilot. He's like the school nerd when it comes to asking the girl to dance. I knew we were out of position, and I hoped I could make up the space and account for his actions when the girl says no. The power blinked 3 times. I held my breath. The power came on, steady. Stand by to reduce turn angle. Ready. Now, give me 30 degrees. I searched the radar for any sign of lead. We hit a massive updraft. The jet lifted up, kite-like for a minute in no gravity. I can't reach my stopwatch to rehack the time. Mental note, subtract 2 seconds, or was it longer? My mantra came out as a whisper. I'm not going to get sick. Lead is gone. No idea where she is. They didn't call the turn. Crew, who heard the turn? The boom interrupts me. Crew, boom, I got her. Sled approaching, boom coming down. The boom announces, contact. Lights on the overhead blink on and the CO reaches up to start the pumps. The boom interphone cracks as the sled driver says, who ordered this whipped mocha meeting place? We weren't supposed to be the first to offload gas. No time to check damage. The CO yelled airspeed as the pilot steadied us on 225 knots. I noted the lightning strike in the log as I identified lead on the scope. Crew, boom, this is Dicey struggling to keep the sled in the envelope. The pilot says, call a breakaway if you need to. The CO keys the mic. Nav, tell lead where we are. I pull the boom mic close to my mouth. Which 54, 55. We are 2741.5 north, 9434.13 west. Heading 330 airspeed 227, altitude 25,450 feet. Roger, pulling up and back to cross over onto the right wing. The pilot announces to the sled driver we are starting a slow descent back to 25,000. I know Wojo is orchestrating an air show maneuver as if we are 2 bi-wing aircraft doing barnstorming. The turbulence is letting up slightly. I'm still talking myself out of throwing up. Lead slides into 95 degrees, a half mile and 500 feet above us off our right wing. The sled drinks all we've got, and before disconnecting, ask where lead is. I say, 55 is bouncing on the right wing. You should see her when you move 15 degrees right. We held our airspeed as I advised the pilot we are running out of air refueling space. The CO called center requesting an extension. The sled was latched onto Witch 54's tit. I was breathing easier, but not letting my mind wander to what had to be God's grace in keeping us from blowing up in midair. We ran our emergency checklist, separating from Witch 55. We flew home at 39,000 feet to conserve fuel. We gave too much to the sled, and now we had to limp home. It was dead quiet going home. I was lost in my thoughts. As we neared the base, I radioed into the command post. Marlin Control, Witch 55. I heard the mic keyed as belly laughs in the background died down. Every hair on my back, still tingling from the electricity, lifted as I narrowed my eyes in disgust. It was the call sign spoken in a female voice that set them off. I reported the lightning strike. That was enough to quiet them down, and they called the ops group commander, waking him up at 0430. He met us on the runway. Guys, when I tell you good hunting, I don't mean for you to come back with a chunk of your tail missing. The SR lost rivets and has a bent pitot tube. I'd say you took the brunt of it when you both entered the same thundercloud. The sun was up before our debrief was over. We trooped over to the hospital for a checkup by the flight surgeon. Just the ringing in my ears was bothering me. Cleared by the doc, I dragged myself to my truck and sat there, tears welling as I murmured, "But for my prayer on the hammerhead." I made it home before I puked.
I'm joined by Marcy Atwood, the author of that breathless and exciting tale. Marcy, thanks for joining us. Listening to that story, it's a remarkable combination of the humanity of being in these settings, being a woman given these responsibilities, and the immense competence, the technical competence just flies out of that tale. I want to jump right to it. After that life-threatening adventure in the air, refueling, that was a Blackbird, correct?
That was a Blackbird, an SR-71.
I want to jump right to it. When you guys survived that, and you were on that flight as navigator, when you called in the tower and they heard a woman's voice, having just been through what you just endured, I know you said in the story you were disgusted, but it had to be deeper than that. Where did that strike? I mean, you had earned your stripes. You had earned that competence in that story. How did that strike you? And what can you address about your time in the military as a woman? You finished up as an 06, a colonel, correct?
I did as a colonel, yes.
Okay. Walk me through that. I don't want to sugarcoat it. Jump right in. A woman in the military, a colonel in the military.
It happens over time. I joined in 1980. In this first assignment, I was probably a first lieutenant on this mission. So I was junior in terms of air crew at the 349th Air Refueling Squadron at Beale. We had a lot of senior officers on those crews. They were lieutenant colonels. And so I think the crew I'm thinking about that was on this mission was a senior captain, almost major pilot, and a first lieutenant co-pilot, and then a old crusty master sergeant boom operator. So the two first lieutenants, the co-pilot and myself, the navigator, were the junior officers. So no matter how many hours you had accumulated at that point, you're still junior. And being junior, you're going to take crap from the more senior guys, and they don't expect the level of proficiency in the job that they would of a more senior person. So what complicated that for me was the fact that I was also their first girl in the front end as an officer in the front. We had a couple of female boom operators who were enlisted, but I was the first to report to that unit, followed by Gail Vitovich, who was the navigator in Witch 5-4. She reported 3 weeks after me. So the two of us were the first women, and we put up with crap from the guys, but we were both focused on doing our job and learning our jobs. So this mission was about learning my job and taking control of the situation, because the pilots, when they have fog and they can't see, or they're up at altitude and they can't see the ground, they're a little bit disoriented in terms of where they are situationally with other airplanes in the sky. And so that was my job. And I did take charge in this mission, especially when the lead aircraft, Gale, didn't turn and we got hit by the lightning. And so it's a story about me standing my ground and disregarding anything anybody said to me after or during or before, and just taking charge and actually making the success happen. And if I hadn't done that, we wouldn't have rolled out in front of the SR-71 and got the gas off and gotten him to where he needed to be.
You said a couple times you and Gail were the first navigators, and you used the phrase, you put up with crap. I have to ask, in 1980, do you consider yourself now, looking back at that you and Gail and the others like you in these positions across the military, but you two in specific, do you feel that you were pioneers in some way?
Yes, we were pioneers. As you look back on it, you can classify yourself as a pioneer. the first in a unit, the first to do a certain mission, the first, the first to take a lightning strike, all those things. But I think at the time I had just my determination and grit to do my job. I just wanted to do my job. And that's all we did back then was we did our jobs, and the jobs are prescribed. There's certain, you had to get a standardization evaluation check ride every year. You had instructors fly with you and correct you. You had to do tests, ground tests. You had to do ground school, and you had to do that all the time. So the military is very good at making sure that aviators are qualified and tested routinely. So the path to doing your job is easy to find. You're doing the job, but the environment, the social environment is barely allowing you to do it because they don't think you should be there, is kind of a separate thing. And you deal with that in the bar. You deal with that with comments on the bus. You deal with that, like in the story, with a call sign, which was witch, and you had a female voice saying witch 55. It's laughable. It's like, oh, look, the witch is talking. You kind of think, oh, come on, don't be juvenile about it. But on the other hand, it's like, hey, I'm doing my job. That's the call sign we were assigned. So shut the bloody blank up.
You can say it.
and let's get this mission done. And my dad was a fighter pilot in the Korean conflict, stationed in Germany. And so he raised me to be committed to what I was doing. And if I said I was going to do something, then do it to the best of your ability. And that's how I approached my military career.
You finished up your military career, as we said, as a colonel, full bird colonel. Looking back from the perch of being a colonel back to being a young lieutenant, but being a woman throughout your entire career, did it get easier on your climb up to being a colonel? And by the way, if you want to cuss, you go ahead, girl.
No, it did not get easier because women started flying military aircraft again after World War II in 1973. Navigators and pilots in the Air Force started in 1977. So I was on the kind of the leading edge of those of us coming in and flying. And that group that started in 77, it took us time to make rank, time to get the experience. And at every level of rank, there's a different challenge. So when I made lieutenant colonel, I was given squadron command, and I was the first female squadron commander of a Navy training squadron, first Air Force commander of that Navy training squadron. I was alone, and I had to be the commander, and I had to do it by myself because I wasn't going to get the support from the team, and I wasn't getting the mentorship needed. And the Commodore, AKA wing commander at that Navy training squadron, didn't want Air Force officers and wasn't really sure how to deal with a woman either. So every level, there's a challenge and there's a concern about, hey, you're the first. Can you really do this job? Some of it's subtle and individual. Not everyone felt that way. It's onesies and twosies, and you learn how to confront them and deal with them and prove to them you can do it, because in executing the job, you're proving you do it. And that's the way I approached it. And I don't have necessarily hard feelings about it all, but I probably do need to heal from it, though.
Yeah, understood. Last question, Marcy, and thank you so much for those answers and obviously for your service and for all the ice breaking you've done. Can you assess for me, where do you think the military is today vis-a-vis women?
It's much different, and it's much, I think, better. Diversity and inclusion is a real thing. We are trained on it now. I'm still a federal employee for the Department of the Air Force, so I go through all of the training that the military guys do as well. And we're working diversity and inclusion to the point of understanding the people you're working with and where they're coming from, and their approach to the work so that you can communicate better and become a better, stronger team. I think there are still firsts out there. The Women Military Aviators, which is a nonprofit organization, has a conference every year at the Women in Aviation International Conference. And we sit down with these young gals that are out there flying fighters right now and bombers and in the Marine Corps and the Navy. And they're telling us that things haven't changed. So it's our job as old retired officers and aviators to help them talk through that and figure out how they can, using the available items that the Department of Defense has now, which is the diversity and inclusion training, using all of the help that they have available to them to actually address any one or two people that they're having problems with. So yes, it's changed. Yes, it's better. Yes, there's more tolerance for all types of diversity of thought and diversity of race and diversity of gender, but there's still interaction between human beings that has to be policed and supported, and you have to learn how to deal with it on your own because it's an important emotional intelligence that we all have to have.
It's a good fight, Marcy, and you've been a big part of it. I want to thank you for being part of the Mighty Penn family. I only wish you clear skies ahead, and thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me and reading my story. I appreciate it.
Take care, Marcy. Now our second story, Packers, read also by Caitlin Nolan. Then I'll talk with author Beth Liechti.
The old young soldier nods approval while Elsie slips on the Packer boots. In a Western store a few miles from the Las Vegas Strip, she struts, modeling the $100 ropers. His blue eyes grin. Right out of the box, the boots fit like she'd worn them for years. Comfortable, like the feel when he asked to sit by her on the beach a few weeks earlier. They clicked. Unlike her, he'd made rank fast after several tours and time in the first Desert War. She's a scrapper who bucks the system. He games the system. His devil-may-care approach with body jokes and stories plays to an audience. Elsie has few stories. She likes to listen to his. She wishes she was carefree like him, not straining under the weight of the rucksack strapped to the back of her brain. Out of the blue, he says, "I'd like to buy the boots for you." The unexpected offer strikes her as extravagant. She'd never spent that much money on boots. Maybe he expects something in return? Really? Maybe. All right, but I don't want to owe you anything. You sure I won't owe you anything? You won't owe me anything. During a long summer at the 2-Bar-7, Elsie bought her first pair of boots with her own money, a pair of brown and buff Abilene. Lately, though, she could poke her finger through matching holes in the soles. The Abilene move to the back of the closet. The new boots show up at the right time. Heavy stitching on the Packers joins 2 shades of brown, oil-tanned leather, blood red and chocolate, like the old young soldier and his past. Back in Southern California, on many days after duty hours, Elsie slips on the boots and drives inland to Santiago Canyon. The supple leather snugs. Dirt and pebbles don't harass her toes and ankles. Inch-high heels with a cowboy slant keep her feet from sliding through the stirrups of her bighorn. Life-saving when her bay mare bucks at a rattler or bolts when an oak branch slaps on a breeze. For hours, she trots dusty single track up and down rocky hills, canters grassy meadows, and inches through cold cricks. The trail eases the throb and the pinch caused by that darn ruck. She sets aside bits of time for the old young soldier. He doesn't ride. Sometimes he drives the truck and trailer, which he loves, but he's rather reckless, sharp on the curves and fast on the straights. Elsie passes a blue streak of this and that on the Southern California coast with the old, young soldier. He makes her laugh and forget the ruck once in a while. As expected, she receives orders. Elsie hugs him. So long. Accustomed to moving out alone, she prefers not to take chances. Elsie keeps the Packers. They sit front and center in her closet. When she pulls them on, she reminisces about drinking and rolling her time away with that old, young soldier. A sweet memory, but then a twinge smarts as she recalls the one time he about-faced to Sirius, a haunt in his blue eyes, a heavy sigh in his voice. I was standing on the runner of the truck. I looked at Hackett. Blood splattered on him all over the cab. His eyes were empty. I shook him. His head fell forward and hit the steering wheel. The old, young soldier pauses. I jumped off, ran and took cover. The tanker exploded, pieces scattered everywhere across the stinking sand. There was nothing I could do. Collides with the ruck. Like the old, young soldier, she senses most everyone humps a ruck. Heck, soldiers brag about whose is heaviest. Frequently, the gargantuan ruck on the back of Elsie's brain cinches tighter, rubbing blisters into her consciousness. On occasion, the maniacal ruck grows superhuman arms and hurls rocks her way, hitting or tripping her. Elsie tries not to flinch. She takes cover with long hours at work, followed by tall shots of tequila. But those Packers, they pull double duty in the evenings. A brush shine readies them for two-stepping over many a honky-tonk floor. Along the line, she hears the old, young soldier married a blonde, uptown civilian. At her new duty station, the Packers spend more time in the closet than on her feet. She raises her hand and deploys to the desert. Interminable hours, little sleep, her insides rock and roll from untreated water in missions where a wrong turn might kill or maim. Unruly tempers, stiff words, heat, anger, and pain distract many by her side. She considers the old, young soldier. In an instant, it seems she returns stateside. She does her duty as the present evaporates, along with her age. The day arrives when Elsie takes off her combat boots for the last time. She signs up for a desk job, 8 hours a day. Civilian life twists a different way. The Packers find her feet again. Astride a black Appy gelding with an attitude, she competes on the Shenandoah Trail, 25 miles, then 50 miles at a stretch. The miles help, but she can't shake off that ruck. Worse, its cinch tightens. About the same time, almost as if in competition, the Packers conspire. At first, an ill-fitting feel when she slips them on. Annoyance turns to uncomfortable, especially in the saddle. Uncomfortable rages into pain that shoots from the ball of her right foot up her leg, an ache that takes her breath away. Like the ruck, the bursts of pain spark without warning or routine. No help from the doctors. One doctor acts as though he thinks the pain in her foot is really in her head. Jerk. Eventually, the pain bolts from her foot through her leg, no matter what pair of boots or shoes she wears. Screaming or whimpering only irritates those around her. Pain beats desire. The Packers drift to the back of the closet with the Abilenes. She turns the gelding out to pasture. The ruck pummels her days and suffocates her nights. Can she hang on? Elsie reads on the internet that foot pain lasting more than a few weeks should not be ignored. Is the same true for a ruck strapped to your brain? It's been more than a few years, so she relents and hobbles her way to Dr. Smith. The good doctor tells her, "See here, Mr. Morton and his neuroma moved into the nerves of your foot between the second and third metatarsal. Over time, Mr. Morton expanded his real estate, not uncommon for someone your age, but nothing you can do to evict him." Vindication. The pain is real and not in her imagination. "Well, it's time to excise Mr. Morton and his neuroma." Elsie can't say yes fast enough. Maybe she should just be as gung-ho to lose the ruck. Under operating room lights, the good doctor cuts Mr. Morton out in less than an hour. 2 weeks recovery and Elsie's foot pain vanishes. Why did she wait so long? After her gait returns to normal, Elsie digs around in the closet and drags out the Packers. Tempting, but what if the pain survived? She inspects the dusty 20-year-old boots. As she brushes the brown leather to a shine, thoughts flicker of the old, young soldier and the laughs they shared. Did he hang on to the blonde? Did he hang on? Elsie pulls on the Packers. Familiar, soft leather hugs her feet and ankles. She wears the old boots for a couple hours, walking slow, then fast, even a jaunty two-step. Good old Dr. Smith. The doctor's expert hands fixed her foot. But she chose to go to the doctor, and she chose to have the doctor operate. What if? What if she chooses to cut the ruck loose? Would it slip away as easily as the pain severed by the scalpel? Maybe she would try.
I'm with Beth Liechti on Zoom right now. Beth, you're in Arizona.
Yes.
I watched you listen to your story, Packers. It was a beautiful experience watching you listen to these memories from that story, and that story is about memory. Where did that phrase, old young soldier, come from? It is profound and beautiful.
The man in question was a young soldier. He was not that old, but he had an old soul, I guess.
What was he like?
Well, he was crazy funny and a lot of fun, but there was something in there that you knew was inside of him that wouldn't come out, but I knew it was there.
My next question is, the story breaks into two themes, and they both juxtapose beautifully. One is the ruck, and one, of course, is the Packers. And they represent very similar, but yet opposite, right? The symbol of the Packers is your youth and your vitality and your freedom. And I know you to love horses, and the Packers are riding boots. But I want to ask you first about the ruck, the backpack, the ruck, where everything got stored and you wore one on the back of your head in the story. Talk to me about the ruck.
First of all, I can't believe you got all of that out of my story.
It's a good story, girl.
the ruck, and everybody has a ruck. I did a lot of rucking in the Army, a lot of miles with a heavy pack and a weapon. And that's just what it feels like in your head sometimes when there's stuff in there, that memories and people and places that keep coming up a time and again. And it's like a ruck. If you've ever humped a ruck, you know what it feels like.
You say in the story, though, that you couldn't take it off. Once you had the pain alleviated in your foot, you had an experience where you said, wait a minute, I can get relief. I can feel better. Why don't I apply it to the ruck? What made the ruck so hard to take off for so long?
That's a good question. I guess because it's something that happened early in life, and it just stayed with me.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Packers. I just loved the symbology of making those boots the icon of your youth and your life and your freedom. Talk to me about buying them and treasuring them and keeping them so long.
They're beautiful boots, just beautiful. I mean, they're the most beautiful pair of boots I ever had, and they feel so good on your feet. And especially when you ride, you got to have a heel when you ride, so your foot doesn't slip through the stirrups. Sort of like life, sometimes your foot slips through and then you get yanked around. But those packers keep you from slipping through the stirrups.
Still got them?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now, you finished up your Army career as a colonel in 2006. I have to ask the question about what was that time like? What were the pioneering years like? Because it's fair to call a woman in the military who rose to that rank in the era that you did a pioneer. Can you talk with me about that? And I want you to be mindful also that I hope young women considering military service or currently in the military service will be listening to this. And I almost want you to phrase your answer in terms of advice to them.
So at 21, I graduated and accepted my commission, and I became a ma'am overnight. I was 21, I become a ma'am. All these old guys are calling me ma'am. So that was weird, and it was uncomfortable, and it's something you have to learn to accept. We think of things as terms of ranks in the Army. You stand in rank. There's the guy in front is the commander, and all the ranks behind. Well, when I was in leadership positions, there was never anybody in front of me in the ranks. No women in front of me. There were a couple women in the ranks behind me, but none in front of me. But that never bothered me. I just worked hard, did a good job, tried to listen to the mentors I had, but a lot of times I didn't, which was my mistake. Because, you're young, you think you know it all. I didn't.
You'd do it again?
Yes.
A young woman comes to you. She's 21. She's graduated. She's considering service. What do you say to her today?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd recommend a woman go into the service now.
No.
My experience, I don't know if I'd recommend it. But there's a lot of young women that are doing great things. But there's a lot of women that have a lot of trouble.
How do we fix? Whatever makes you say no, Beth, what fixes it? Or can it be fixed? I'm so hoping you'll say yes, it can be.
Can it be fixed? Well, I think you have to go into the military wanting to be part of the solution. You have to be a fighter. You have to be tough. You have to be willing to go the extra mile. You have to have this certain mindset that you're going to overcome no matter what. Man or woman, that's what you have to go in with.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to revisit your answer when you would say you might not want a woman. If women like that exist, you existed, listeners to this show will hear several. If a young woman comes to you and says yes to everything you just said, you still say don't go? Or would you say, all right, we have to keep a presence in the military. Women have to be represented. Don't know. I'm not trying to force an answer here, but what you just said, women are, you are. What about another young woman at 21 who has those traits?
Oh, I'd recommend that she consider the service, but it certainly isn't a cakewalk. You can't go into it thinking it's about you. It's not about you. You're subordinated to the mission.
Just like the men.
Just like the men, right.
Which is, I suppose, the whole point.
Right.
Yeah. I'm so glad I made you revisit that question, Beth. But I have so much respect for you and so much respect for the women that have come through the Mighty Pen. There's such a nobility, an extra nobility, if I were honest, to women serving. It seems like even the ones serving today are still pioneers. Yeah, you can't nod because it's a radio show.
Yes, that's true. I just think of the women I know from World War II and Korea and Vietnam. They had it a lot rougher than I did, but they were separate. They had separate women organizations for women then. I was in the beginning. They disbanded the Women's Army Corps in 1978. I came in 1981. So women were totally integrated with men. So it was just very different. We didn't get any guidance. It was just get thrown in and you figure it out.
Tell me where you are today, Beth Liechti. You're in Arizona. You got horses. You look happy.
I'm learning to write.
Yeah?
Yes.
About the ruck, now that it's gone?
I didn't say it was gone.
Oh, all right. Beth, I have nothing but admiration and affection for you. And I thank you so much for being part of the Mighty Pen and for being part of this podcast. Thank you so much.
Well, David, can I thank you for helping guide all of us veterans in telling our stories? Because it's just been a phenomenal experience. Not just my story, but hearing the other guys and gals tell theirs has just been Well, I wrote that poem about the process you use, and it's just been wonderful. So thank you for taking your time to do that.
Well, I'm honored and flattered, Beth. Thank you so much. You take care. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Beth. The Mighty Pen Project is a free writing program for military veterans offered by the Virginia War Memorial Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit. If you'd like to learn more about the Mighty Pen, or sign up for one of our writing classes on Zoom, or just send us your thoughts, email us at mppodcast@vawarmemorial.org, or use the link in the podcast description. If you want to read today's stories, and many more, use the link to go to the Mighty Pen Archive. And if you enjoy this podcast, please share it. Music for this episode was provided by David L. Robbins. If you'd like to support the Mighty Pen, follow the charitable donation link in the podcast description. I'm David L. Robbins, and I want to thank you for listening to the Mighty Pen Podcast. It's an honor.